Good morning, guys. Happy Sunday. I'm going to be chatting with Shelby today, who is I'm going to have to double check what she is, a cognitive, a somatic and intuitive healer. And we're going to be talking about body-based healing, so somatic healing. She's just joined. See if you can request to join Shelby, if possible. There you go. Yeah. I'm just letting her in. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. Hey!
Hey!
How are you
That's
doing?
good. Thank you. I'm so glad that worked. I've never done an Instagram live before, so I was like, fingers crossed that works without any issues.
It went perfectly. Well done. Good.
Your directions were really good.
Oh, thanks. How has your day been? Because for you it's the evening, for me it's just starting. So how has your whole day been?
Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah, 7:30 p.m. here in Australia, and it's been about 35 degrees all day. So it's
Oh,
in the evening now, and it's still 32, so
oh, that
very
sounds
hot here.
lovely. Oh, I'd love that. It's quite cold here and really wet and rainy day, and the forecast is rain all day. So lovely. It's lovely
Oh,
here.
fun. Well, you can
Uh,
take some of our heat because, yeah, it's a little bit too warm here for me today.
yeah, I would love that though. But cool. Thank you so much for joining me today and talking about somatic, like body-based healing, which is a really interesting topic. I think I know kind of what it is, but obviously you're going to have way more information about that. So, like from my understanding, obviously it's more within the body rather than
Mm.
talk therapy, the mind. So things maybe like breathwork and other aspects and healing modalities that you use. So do you
Mhm.
want to like start off with first of all telling us a bit about your story? Like, how did you even become this like intuitive healer? Where did it?
Mm. Yeah, it's really funny because people often ask me that, and I'm kind of like, I don't really even know where it sort of started from. Like for me, it all just sort of fell into place and just happened really naturally, which I think's
Mhm.
beautiful. But I guess if we take it a step like back, my parents have always been super spiritual. So I actually connected with my mum before I was even born. She saw a psychic before she was even pregnant, and she said, "Oh, I've got your daughter here. She's got dark hair, green eyes. She's
That's
got
so
dimples," like
cool.
all of this stuff. And my mum was super open to it, but was like a little bit skeptical. And it's like quite a long story. So, long story short, if it wasn't for that psychic, I actually wouldn't be here because she told my mum that I was going to be born on my birthday and like all of this other stuff before my mum was even pregnant. And the timeline didn't work out. I would have been born in August, not in June. So my mum's like, I can't go to the hospital and say, like, oh, my psychic friend said that I'm going into labor, like all of this stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
she did. And thank God that she did because my mum was like having a silent labor. I was coming foot first, the cord around my neck.
Oh.
My mum had like all this internal bleeding. So, like, if it wasn't for this psychic, we both wouldn't be here.
Oh
And so I'm
wow.
so grateful that like she went through that and really trusted the psychic in that stage. So from
Did you?
there, like,
But anyway, did you say June? Are you born in June?
yes, I
Me
am. I'm a
too.
Gemini. Oh,
Yeah,
really?
me
What date are
too.
you born?
The 8th.
I'm the 11th. We're
Oh,
so close.
cool. We're the same star sign, so that's cool.
I love that because people often say, "Oh, what star sign are you?" And I'm like Gemini, and they're like, "Oh, two-faced, stubborn."
No.
I'm like, "No."
Yeah. Oh, cool. Sorry, I had to just butt in there. Carry on.
No, I love that. So yeah, since that like date, my parents were like, wow, like there's, truth in all of this. So I grew up with psychics in the house. My dad did his Reiki masters. So when I was young and had like growing pains, my dad would do Reiki on me and
I
we did
love
like
that.
tarot readings, like all of that cute stuff. So that was kind of like my childhood and I guess my introduction into spirituality. It was pretty normal in my household. My oldest brother, he'll hate that I'm saying this, but he could like talk to spirits when we were younger. Like I'd constantly hear him like talking. We thought it was imaginary friends. Turns
Yeah.
out it was spirits.
So
And
cool.
then all of a sudden, like my whole family just sort of disconnected from it. I don't really know why. We just, yeah, stopped sort of talking about spirituality. My dad stopped practicing Reiki. I think everyone just sort of got busy with like the craziness of life.
Mhm.
And then I went to uni, I studied psychology. I knew I really wanted to help people and thought that that was traditional, counseling psychology, that sort of thing. And then
Mm-hmm.
I graduated with this like really expensive piece of paper, and I'm like, what do I do with this now? I like all of a sudden had so much resistance around studying my honors and going down the real traditional way of like healing people. And then it was like literally my 22nd birthday. I just woke up, went downstairs to my mum, and I was like, I want to do like a holistic wellness center. And she looks at me like, what do you mean? Like, where did this come from? And then, yeah, it just literally came from there. I worked with a healer to like develop into being able to do like universal healing and Reiki. And then, yeah, through my own healing, learned how amazing breathwork is. I learned that it's, yeah, not all just what we can experience in our mind and what we're consciously aware of. It's so much deeper than that. So just gone on like this whole little rabbit hole of like learning different modalities and tapping into all of that. And yeah, opened a wellness center, like literally had 0 clients, 0 money, no business experience. And I just like started doing this thing of like acting as if and showing the universe I was serious.
Yeah.
Just started looking at like spaces, found this space, fell in love. They were like, the keys, like, here you go, it's yours. And I haven't looked back since.
It looks beautiful as well. From all the photographs
Oh,
I've seen, it literally looks so stunning. But that
oh,
is so
thank
amazing.
you.
What a cool upbringing. I absolutely love that.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so when you said as well, like universal healing, so what even does that involve? Is that
So
something
it,
along the lines of somatic kind of like body based as well?
yeah, so universal healing super similar to Reiki if you're
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that.
Yeah.
So I worked with a healer, and it's kind of like a modern version of Reiki. So Reiki is very traditional, as in you have to do a set amount of symbols when you're working on someone. So drawing symbols on them and calling in different energy. So
Okay.
universal healing is kind of like a modified version of that, and you can sort of put your own spin on it. So I worked with this healer for probably about 2 years, and she did something that's called attuning me. So she did like this
Oh.
whole ceremony where she like breathed into my mouth, and she did it like, it was full on. I didn't really know what I was like expecting, but it was like next level. And I connected with like my higher self, and they
Mm-hmm.
told me all of this stuff. And then from then on, I can like activate my hands, and I can channel like purest energy from the universe. And often when I say that to people, they're kind of like, okay, like I'm not sure that I believe that. Like, what does that mean? But you can actually see in my hands when I activate, it goes all like spotty. And then with my clients, like I put it over their face or different body
Yeah.
parts, and they'll feel like intense heat.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
say
through,
it's get really hot. Yeah.
yeah, and like I've had heaps of people come in as clients, and they're a little bit like skeptical. And I had one client say, did you put a light on? And I'm like, no, like I just have little fairy lights on. And he was like, no, you definitely put a light on, because I had like this light in my face. I'm like, no, that was like your third eye activating. Or someone else will say, oh, you definitely put like your hand by the heater and then put it over my face. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, like it's just energy.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. That's amazing. So so you do that, and then you obviously do like breath work. What other stuff do you do, like sound healing? How so basically like what is somatic healing?
Yeah. So it's the best way, like I can describe it, is kind of to break it down. Like I say, I'm a cognitive somatic intuitive healer. So
Mm-hmm.
cognition refers to like the brain and the
Yeah.
mind. So with clients, I really like pull on what I've learned in psychology, and I'm also doing advanced studies in counseling at the moment. So with that side of things, I really like sit down and we do talk therapy, and we'll talk about what the client is consciously aware of, because
Mm.
often people come to me and they're like, I've experienced this, or I'm feeling like this is stuff that they're actually aware of, kind of surface level, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then the next part would be the somatic stuff. So often I say to people, like, let's say that they experienced childhood trauma where their parents are arguing constantly, or they get
Mm-hmm.
quite violent. So I say, okay, like during that, what happens in your body? And it takes a little bit of time. People aren't that connected to their body in this society. So they'll say, oh, I'm not too sure. And I say, like, okay, let's like think about it for a second. If I yell at you right now and activate like your fight or flight, what in your body are you feeling?
Yeah.
And then they'll say, oh, my heart is like going really fast, I'm getting a bit sweaty, or maybe they feel sick or shortness of breath. And I'm like, that's your somatic response. So that's how your body
Mm.
is communicating to you that you're going through trauma. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So we look at that. So we'll go through breath work, and like the more somatic stuff, which I can talk about after. And then the intuitive stuff is what I've learned through working with a healer. So the way that I work is obviously channeling universal energy and actually pulling on, like, because when we go through trauma or experience stuff, it gets stuck in our chakras or in our energy fields, and then that can create physical pain in the body. Or for example, like you just feel like I've processed that thing, like I thought I was over my ex or that trauma, whatever it is, but you just constantly feel like you've got no energy, or you just feel a bit yuck, and that's because they've left like an energetic imprinting on you. So the intuitive side is me, I can actually sense so say like talking to somebody, I might feel like a lump in my throat, for example, or like a pain in my hip. And I'll be like talking to them and I'm like, okay. And then I'll get them up on the healing bed. And then when I'm actually tuned in, I can fully feel that that's like where the blockages are. So then I'll channel like universal energy and like pull that through the body. And then often they'll say, oh, that hip pain that I had's completely gone. I'm like, yeah, I know. Like we got rid of the imprinting that's in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. How quickly can you dive into that? Like, can you literally just see someone in the supermarket and then 5 minutes later start really, or do you have to really like tune in, like ground yourself in that aspect?
Yeah, I used to pick up on people like straight away. Like if I went to like a cafe or like a supermarket, I'd often leave feeling so drained, or like like I'd be really anxious, and I'm like, what is this? Like I'm comfortable with that store or that cafe, but I'd leave just feeling really like yuck. And I spoke to my healer about that, and she said it's because constantly when we walk into a room, you just feel stuff, and we create like energetic cords that connect with people, and everyone does it. It just depends how open you are. Like, you know, you can walk in somewhere sometimes and just feel like sick, or like you just feel really like gross, or other times you walk in and you're like, oh, that person's energy is like super magnetic, I love it. So we all can do it. It's just like the deeper you dive into learning how to like transmute other people's energy is the more that you'll feel it. So I've learned to start like disconnecting from it. So I'm kind of the other side, like I feel it so much, but I don't often want to. Like my clients are different, but random people I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel that, like, you know, say.
Yeah, you've got to try and like protect yourself and have that boundary.
Yeah, exactly.
I really love that you have all the aspects, because talk therapy is great, and obviously like the more body-based, more subconscious level is also great, but putting them together, that's where the magic really happens, and the much more deep healing, as I'm sure that you experience. So tell me a little bit more about the somatic healing aspect then, because I know like you also do breath work, and I also trained in breath work, and that really helped me, I believe, regain my period back as well, along with having to tweak some of my diet and lifestyle aspects. I started just randomly doing breath work. Like my friends and my partner at the time kept saying to me like, do breath work, and they were doing it all the time, but I was just like, no, I just don't fancy it. But one day I just felt really low, and I just randomly got a YouTube video of breath work, and then it just all changed from then on. And I had like an emotional release, and I had memories come up about my dad that left, and I was like, where the hell is this coming from? And then I felt like intense swirling sensations, and then I came on my period, so I felt like there was blockages around that womb space area. So I know it can be so powerful. So yeah, just talk to me a bit about all the practices that you use that's somatic.
Yeah, so it really depends on like what client comes in and what they're experiencing. But if we're going to go off of clients like kind of relating to your work, I often get like women especially coming in. Like I don't think I've ever had a female client that's come in who's had like a really open sacral chakra and throat chakra. They're the two that they walk
And they're
in
linked,
straight
aren't
away.
they?
Yes, if you
Right.
actually, Google like the pelvic floor and the vocal cords, they literally look the same, which I was like
Yeah.
amazed at. I was like, I didn't
Same.
realize that they have literally like the same sort of structure. So of course, energetically, they're going to be super linked. And often for women, it's not even like what we've experienced personally. Like I always feel like we have a few different ways of imprinting and like creating that stuff within the body. So we have our personal stuff that we've obviously directly experienced through like partners, or like directly to us through our work or that sort of thing. Then we've got like the stuff that we've experienced through culture, conditioning, society. And then we also have like generational trauma, which is what's passed through from previous, like our grandmother, our great grandmother, and that sort of thing. So it's not just something simple. Like I often get people come in and they're like, okay, so I've like gone through a breakup and I've experienced this and this is what my like traumas are. And then we break it down and we're like, it's not that, it's so many other things and so many other aspects. And that's what I think is so magic about the work that we do, is it's not just one shoe fits all. And I think traditional like counseling, and I'm not bagging like psychology or anything, because obviously I still use that in my practices, I think it's got its place, but I think it's only part of the puzzle. Like there's, like I said, we're constantly changing and our needs are changing and the way that we need to heal is changing. So I can think that just like doing this one thing of like lying on a couch and talking about it is going to fix us. Like we actually need to embody it and really move it. So it's like we have a beautiful awareness around mental health, and I love that. And I'm so grateful that we are a society that talks quite freely about our issues. But then we need to also talk about like our physical health, our emotional health, and then I also think like our energetic and soul health as well. So it's like really layered and so much that we have to dive into. And it's exhausting. Like, I understand that. Like people come into me and they're like, this is the deepest work. And I'm like, it's always constantly going as well. I don't think you can come in have an hour session and then you're like good to go. But with clients that I see, they often come in because they've got trauma in those areas. So for example, as a female being or as a woman, through society we've been conditioned to think that we have to kind of suppress that feminine essence and, you know, keep up with men or with that masculine energy. Like we're in a society of like hustle culture and like get everything done. And I love it. Like I do, you know, I'm so grateful that we have, you know, similar rights to men and that we, you know, have developed so well since previous women before us, but at the cost of also suppressing our feminine essence. So I get a lot of women who come in similar to you who have either lost their periods or they've got really painful periods, or even just like having blockages in that area. So they don't feel really connected to their body. They don't have that kind of sensual energy. And I heard the other day, which I thought was amazing, they were like, women are incredible. You can have a conversation with a woman who, you know, you're just like this, like kind of just straight fact, like there's no real energy or whatever, you're just like and then the woman can turn on like her sensual energy where she's all like this and she's magnetic and you're like, oh. And it's so true. Like I don't think men have that sort of like magnetic energy like women do. And I think that it's linked to our life force energy. So if we're talking about our menstrual cycle, obviously if that egg is fertilized, it would have created a human being, a brand new life. But because obviously you don't let it get fertilized, it leaves the body, but it's still the energy and the imprinting there is life force. And I think that that's kind of just pushed aside in society. It's just like, oh, we've got our period, like it's a real inconvenience, and oh, I don't feel as energetic as I normally am. And we kind of, you know, take Nurofen, like don't really spend any time with it and we just push through. Whereas if we really sit with that energy and we look at it and we see that it is life force energy and it is that potent, it honestly changes the whole relationship that we have. So part of the work that I do is teaching my female clients about how amazing it is to be a female and to be able to experience this beautiful cycle and connecting back in with the yoni, with the womb space, and actually realizing that there's a huge energy center there that we can tap into at any moment. Like for example, before this call, because it's quite late in the evening, I was feeling a little bit sluggish, but I put on some like really sexy music. I did like hip movements, moving around and round, because obviously we're like cyclical beings, so circles are really beautiful for the feminine energy. I activated like my Kundalini, so like really pulling in that beautiful energy. And then like as soon as we started, I'm feeling like really energetic and like really ready to go. So I feel as if this is like a huge energy center for us that's just like shut down because it makes us feel like we're potentially weak, or, you know, if we do take time to honor our cycle, then we're not as productive as men, or maybe we don't have the same opportunities, that sort of thing. So part of what I do is helping women to connect back in with that. And often women walk into the center without even knowing that they have so much suppressed anger. So for women, anger is a huge one. And I think through society, we're conditioned to think that anger is this really undesirable, unattractive emotion that we need to just push down and push down. And
what does that look like? Suppressed anger, what does it look like?
So often suppressed anger can create like PCOS, endometriosis, like blockages in that area. You have a low sex drive, like anything that you think of when you think of like your womb space. As women, that's usually where we push our anger down and we hold all of our emotions in there. And then because we're obviously linked to our throat, this is when you can stop talking your truth, people pleasing, getting like that croaky throat, you know, when you're expressing yourself and your throat's trying to close and you're like, no, like keep it open. And often you don't think about it, but it is that suppressed anger. So I help my women do like an anger release, which is one of my favorite somatic practices. So basically we will grab like an ottoman or a pillow and I will just put on like some really loud music and I will be like, go for it. And often it will take a few seconds that like, oh, like kind of hitting it or like, like this is silly. And I like completely agree. I used to feel so self-conscious doing that. But you get to a certain point where you just think, okay, like let's do it. And they'll like go for it. And it's been, you know, 5-10 minutes of them screaming. And then often below anger is other emotions, sadness, resentment, disappointment. And then they'll start expressing that. And I take them through a process of getting really primal. So again, as women, we have been conditioned to be quiet, to be seen, not to be heard, you know, to please everybody else. So I'm like, tap into that like wild woman, that wolf kind of energy. And by the end of it, they're like screaming and swearing and like just letting it all out. And then afterwards they say to me that they feel so much lighter, they just feel so much more free. So that's a really, really good one that we go through.
And then that relates to a lot of my clients with the people pleasing and things like that, because my clients are those with hypothalamic amenorrhea that have lost their period due to physical or mental stress. And so often I see a lot of people pleasing, perfectionist tendencies, not really speaking their truth, things like that. And I kind of was smiling a lot because I always say to people, I'm not an angry person. Like no one ever sees me get angry. I feel like that's an emotion I've never ever touched upon. So I probably am hiding some stuff. And obviously I lost my period as well. So maybe underneath that, like I am actually, there's anger there. Of course, I'm human. There's going to be anger that I've just never shown. So maybe I need to start developing this practice. It sounds quite daunting. I definitely would laugh, I think. But then I need to break that down.
Anyone that says to me they don't have anger, like I think I'm a pretty positive person, but I'm like, I have a lot of suppressed anger. You know, it doesn't, like often with inner child stuff, for example, people say to me, no, I had like a picture perfect childhood. And I'm like, yeah, you probably did, but there's still going to be some sort of trauma there because, you know, your teacher, for example, can say like shush, and then you internalize that as like what I have to say isn't worthy, or like I'm not allowed to speak out, and then that becomes imprinting within the body and you kind of shrink in. So whenever people say to me, no, like I don't experience that, I'm like, we'll get to the bottom of it, we'll find it, it's in there somewhere.
Or even like you said, like societal of other people's like judgments on what you should or shouldn't do and how you should and shouldn't look, which again I see with my clients as why they potentially lose their period, because they feel like they need to look a certain way and be in a certain frame and have like low self-esteem issues. So I guess that all kind of relates. When you say about trauma, so obviously it can all get stuck in the body, which I've learned from breathwork and moving that stagnant energy. So with trauma, there's such a spectrum, isn't there? Like you said, it could be someone telling you to shush, or someone maybe even bullying you, to something much deeper, or even like birth trauma and things like that, how you was brought into the world. Is there any other examples that you can bring to mind about like how someone could have trauma and they not even realize their body's holding trauma?
Yeah, definitely. Even something as crazy as I was reading that obviously our mums have all of their eggs when they're in like your grandma's belly, and we have all of our eggs when we're in our mum's bellies. So something like that. So for example, the egg that is fertilized to create you is in your mum's belly. So if she's experienced some sort of trauma before you're even conceived, you can take on that as well. And I know that that sounds really like woo-woo, but there's actually like studies around the Dutch famine, where they did studies about the kids that were born after the Dutch famine. They actually had like a change in their DNA, and they go through like epigenetic studies, and it shows that like your environment and how you're conceived and what you come from actually can change like your DNA. So it's like woo-woo as well, because you can look at like energetics, but it's also like proven that Yeah, by like science, which is what I love. That's why like I love breath
Yeah.
work, because you can talk about breath work with like the prana energy flowing around your
Mhm.
body, but you can also then say like the spinal fluid is traveling up your spine and going to your brain. So I love the
Yeah.
practices that you can make super woo woo, but you can also make like backed up by science, which is
Yes.
amazing.
Which reminds me of
Yes,
Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of him?
yes, I love
Yeah.
his work. Yeah.
He links the two, bridges the two as well, which is
Mm.
important. Same with like you said, with the fact that you do the cognitive like behavioral stuff, and then also the more deeper rooted
Mm.
unconscious stuff. It's really important. Okay, that's
Yeah.
um so what do you commonly see around like with somatic healing with females then? Is it a lot of like self-worth issues that come up
Mm.
or that kind of thing? Like what do you commonly see with females?
Yeah, it is. And again, it goes back to like that sacral chakra and the throat chakra, like a lot of that sort of stuff. So I have a lot of clients that come in who've experienced sexual assault. And so that's
Mm.
something that we're often like working through is like teaching the body that it's safe again. So
Hmm.
I have clients that often come in and they're like, I've seen a psychologist for like 2 to 5 years and like I feel like I've processed that trauma. I'm feeling really good. But then they'll come to me because they'll smell like a cologne, for example, and they'll be
Yeah.
like, all of a sudden their body goes into that fight or flight again, and they come to me and they say, you know, I've worked so hard to like consciously process everything that happened, and I say to them, yeah, but you haven't worked on creating a safe space for the body again. And, you know, when we experience trauma, there's often three responses from our body. And it's
Hmm.
often we want to do fight or flight. So we
Hmm.
want to either run away or fight, say, if we're talking about sexual assault, like the predator,
Hmm.
or we want to look for social support. So we'll often scream out for help and we'll try and get somebody else to help us. And if those two aren't available, then usually we'll shut our body down and we create disassociation so that we actually don't consciously process what's happening to us. And it's a really strong form of survival. So at the time, it's really beneficial for us because it's creating a separation between what we're actually going through. So I understand it because sometimes what we're going through is unbearable. But
Yeah.
then on the other side of that, when we try and heal it, it can be really hard because we consciously think, no, like I've processed that. I don't really remember much of what happened, but then your body remembers it. So even
Hmm.
like I said, cologne or a door slamming, that loud noise, or somebody breathing, there's little triggers that your body remembers that your mind doesn't. And
Mm.
that can be quite hard because the brain is the thing that's trying to constantly understand what's happening to us. And if it can, it's like, what's going on? Like it doesn't know. So
Yeah.
yeah, teaching the body to be safe.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is through like, if we use that example, you can do like yoni healing. So something you can do at home is even just place like your hands in that area and just consciously send your breath down there
Hmm.
and just create some like energy and awareness to that space and just start, you know, you can use like a mantra like I am safe, I like nothing bad's going to happen to me, you know, those sorts of things, and just create some sort of safe energy in the
Hmm.
body. You can do a technique called de-armoring, which is where
Oh
you
yeah.
can get like a crystal wand, or I
Hmm.
use just like a clear wand, and you like press on different parts of your cervix
Hmm.
and just
That
breathe
like
into.
numb. Yeah.
Yeah, and often like you get different emotions come up, like sadness
Hmm.
or anger, and then I can just like, yeah, send the breath there. Or sometimes I'm like, right, I need to like physically move this, so do some dancing, again moving the hips or doing some anger release, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
A lot of my clients find really good results with yoni eggs. I don't know if you've
Mm.
heard about them
Yeah. I've
before.
used that a few times.
Yeah, so they really like using them. So it's like a tumbled crystal that you can have inside you, and it helps to like energetically clear everything out.
Hmm. And
Yeah,
just
like
connect to
those
that
sorts of things.
space as well, because we become very disconnected is what I see as well,
Mm,
and very disconnected with your womb space, and even disregarding your femininity as well in some
yes.
way, like you said about kind of me being in the more masculine energy and
Mm,
go go go, so just channeling that energy back down to the womb
mm,
feminine energy. Yeah.
yeah. It's so true. And I wasn't even aware until I dived into this sort of work that I didn't like even consider, but men are on like a 24-hour cycle. So
Mhm.
they have like their testosterone peak at like usually 8 a.m. They, you know, do whatever they want in the day. And then by 8 p.m., it kind of drops off. Whereas women, we don't really have that like real structured kind of like 24-hour cycle. Ours on
Yeah,
average is like a 28-day cycle.
yeah,
And yeah, and I've started like syncing with the moon as well, which I love because it's like super woo woo. And as soon as I
yeah,
started like syncing in with that and really like connecting with my period, because often my clients come in and I'm like, okay, like what's your relationship like with your body? And they're like,
yeah,
yeah, pretty good. Or, you know, they'll have some sort of self-esteem issues, but overall they're okay. But then I'm like, okay, what's your relationship like with your cycle? And they're like, what do you mean? Like I, you know, get it every month
yeah,
and that's what it is.
yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And I challenge them to even, like, for example, I swapped to a cup
Mm-hmm.
just so that I could experience like the full essence of seeing it. And to start
Mm,
with, it really like grossed me out. I didn't like it. It made me really uncomfortable. And I sat with that and I was like, why am I uncomfortable with something that is so
yeah,
natural? And I learned that it was through conditioning. You know,
yeah.
at school, we're just taught how to just have a period, how to not get pregnant, and that's
Have to
basically it.
hide. Like if you come on in class, like quickly
Yes.
grab your like sanitary items and
Mm-hmm.
up your sleeve and go to the
Yes.
toilet kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's so crazy because it's like something that is so beautiful and like so natural. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I started like really connecting in with the lunar cycle and
Mm-hmm.
learning that, you know, there's four ways that we can usually bleed. So it will be, they call it like the red moon, which is where you bleed on the full moon, you ovulate on the new moon.
Yeah.
And then you have the white moon, which is where you bleed on the new moon, you ovulate on the full moon, and that's the
Yeah.
most common one
Typical.
they
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got the pink moon, which is where you bleed in between the new moon and the full. And then you have the purple moon, which is where you bleed in between the full and the new. So
Yeah.
I was like really like learning what the different energies meant when you were like synced up with different
Mm.
parts. And it's really cool when you sit there, like, for example, when you're synced in with the red moon, so you bleed on the full, that one's usually for like healers or people that have just become mothers or people that are
Yeah.
giving to the community. So if you're like birthing a new idea or you're working on a project, you usually will like sync up with that. And that's the kind of energy that you give out. So
Mm-hmm.
I was even creating like little relationships like that, like learning what it means when my cycle changes and not necessarily being like dreading it. Like for a really long time, I dreaded getting it. Whereas now I really honor it and I love it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that that can change like your relationship with yourself and also with your body.
Yeah. How do you feel like connecting with your cycle has really changed you then? Do you just feel like a deeper connection with your body? Is that like
Yeah.
you've taken away from that?
And also, like, I learned, which I didn't even know. I don't know if you're familiar with like the red tent era, like a
Yeah.
while ago. And
Yeah.
I love that. And so, anyone that's not familiar, in the more tribal times, they used to have what was called a red tent. And it was where, obviously, because they were living like closely together, most of the women used to sync up and they'd have the same
Mm-hmm.
period. And they would all gather and they would all be bleeding and they would free bleed and like give it back to the earth because they believed that it was like the purest energy to
Yeah.
create like rebirth. And they'd often honor like the pregnant women, they'd bring them in the tent. And the thing that I love the most is that they would believe that that's when women were the most intuitive.
Yeah.
So the men would often honor women who were going through their cycle because they believed that spirit would give messages to the men through the women. And they used to actually like fight each other to sleep with women when they were menstruating because they believed that that would then bless them and whatever they were, you know, wanting to come into fruition, they would then have. So
Mm.
I loved that. So when I learned that and I learned how sacred it used to be, like
Yeah.
men would love talking to women about it and even just spending time with them when they were bleeding. I
Mm.
was like, what's happened to us as a society where like I think there's a lot changing. Like for example, when I like talk to my male friends about it, they're a lot more open and they have conversations. But even like when I was younger, they would be, you know, made fun of and made to feel like it's
Yeah.
dirty and gross. Yeah, and I just think like what happened from it becoming like this sacred thing that was honored to then this thing that was like really gross and dirty when it's so beautiful and natural.
Yeah, I feel the same because I was kind of like that and always wanted to hide it. before, but then going down the road of losing my period and now being so grateful every time it comes and all the effort I had to put in and tweaks to regain it. And now obviously I help people regain their periods, so I talk about periods every single day. I talk to my guy mates about periods, like everyone, and I just don't feel like it's an issue at all. Yeah, so I'm much more open about it, and it does help everyone else around you think, oh, okay, like I can talk about it too. And even when I've met up with like females for the first time ever, I start talking about their periods, and it's just normal to me, even though people would frown upon that or whatever. But yeah, why is it not? It's such a natural thing.
Yeah, I love that.
When you were talking about like periods, kind of relates to what you mentioned to me before, which I don't know what it is really, yoni imprinting. So you mentioned the word imprinting earlier. Is it kind of the same? Is it the same thing? Is it like trauma imprints within the yoni womb space?
So we can get like imprinting in any part of our energy centers, but for females, it's most commonly in the yoni space. And yeah, it's basically like what we've been talking about, how women hold a lot of their trauma down there, and then that can create blockages around even wanting to have intercourse, like self-pleasure. Also, again, like that heavier emotions, we store a lot down there. So that's when we can create like actual issues, like physical medical issues within the body. So anytime a client comes to me and they've got some sort of issue, I'll like try and break it down, and somewhere, whether it's from like a masculine in their life, so like a past partner, their dad, society, there's often something in there. And again, it can be stuff that they're not even like consciously aware of, just something that they've heard or has happened to them, and then they just suppress it down. And instead of like processing it and letting it go, moving through it, it gets pushed down, and then creates like a range of issues in like a heap of areas in their life.
But you even see that with stress, don't you? When someone's like stressed, you see certain things manifest in their body that are related to stress. So yeah, it completely makes sense. Your body's always trying to talk to you. With so say a client did come to you with these issues surrounding their womb, maybe they've got PCOS or anything that's manifested. What is the best practices that you normally take them through? I'm assuming you go through the talk therapy, cognitive kind of aspect, and then when you switch to a more body base, what are your kind of go-tos for that womb space area, or is it completely different for what the person needs?
Yeah, it like definitely changes based on different clients, but say like a stock standard one, we'll talk about it, and then we'll kind of look into their childhood, so what their dad's role was like in their life, because often a lot of us have like daddy issues and stuff like that comes up, and then we'll look at how that mirrors in their life now. So often, and people often cringe when I say this, but like our current partners or previous partners mirror the same energy or the same experiences that we had with our dad. So often if there's like, for example, if a dad was very violent or quite like abusive verbally, then a lot of my clients will date someone who's very similar to that. So we'll look at what is mirroring from previous experiences to their experiences now, and we'll go through.
Oh, sorry. Is that because we haven't healed that? Like we haven't kind of compartmentalized, what the word is, that box? Is that why then looking for that and like reality brings it to us?
Yes, it can be a couple of things. Like they say the universe keeps sending us our lessons until we heal them and learn from them. But then also we're going with what's familiar, during the ages of 6 to 12, that's when we're like developing like what we think is right and what we think's wrong, what we think's normal. So during that time, if you're experiencing these things, then that's going to be familiar to you and that's going to be normal. So then you'll seek that. And even if consciously you're like, I don't want to date someone like that, that your body's familiar with those things and the energy's familiar, so you feel safe even though you're not safe. So it's a really complicated thing, because like unlearning those things, you just think like, how do I do this, because it feels so normal. So we'll go through like a process of like looking at mirrors and where things are showing up in a range of different places. And sometimes it's not even that deep. It could just be that you've got like a boss who talks to you the same way that like your dad did, or a previous partner. So there's something in there that you have to heal. And often it comes back to self-esteem and people pleasing and what you think that you're allowed to accept. And so raising that, so we'll do some self-love stuff. Or sometimes my clients come in and they they're like not at the space to really do the deep work like that. So we'll often start with clearing the energetic stuff first. So I'll get them up on the healing bed. I'll do sound healing using some crystal bowls, like, you know, the Tibetan bowls. That sort of sound.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I use
the frequencies, do they like tune into our chakras? Am I being really silly here?
Yeah,
how does that work?
Yeah, you're spot on. So each bowl has a different frequency, so different practitioners use different ones. So for me personally, I use chakra bowls. So I've got 7 crystal and they're clear quartz crystal bowls, and each of them are the same frequency as the chakras. So if I know that a client's got past trauma in their sacral chakra, which is where our yoni is, so between our hips, I'll play that bowl a lot to like activate it. So like with the chakras, I often say that when they're open and activated, it's like a water flow, like a water like going up and down, and it's really open and flowing really nice. And then, for example, in our childhood, something happens, so a pebble goes in the flow of water, or in our life, like a big boulder, depending on what the trauma is. And then the water's trying to get through like all of these blockages. So until we completely clear all of them, it's going to be this struggle of like half of the energy that we could be experiencing.
Which is going to take a lot of time, right? Because even if like we're all clear, then 2 weeks later, some other thing we need to work through, right? It's a continual thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing with healing, like everything's like that. Like people often say, like, oh, I've been working on this for a while, and I'm like, yeah, but it's like a lifelong thing. Like, you know, it's not something that we can ever just be like, I'm completely healed, because you could step outside and be re-triggered again. And I think that's kind of in our society, we want like a quick fix, like something just to, you know, like a pill to take and we feel better. But like, as you mentioned, like our body is constantly trying to communicate with us, but we're just like disassociated with it at the moment and disconnected to it. So if our knees are hurting, we just take pain relief, or, you know, if we're tired, we drink a coffee. We don't really sit and ask our bodies like, what is it? And that's like a process that I do with my clients. Is we even keep record like in their journal every day of like different things. And so, for example, if they get hip pain, then I'll say to them, just sit with that for a second instead of like masking it. So sit there, put your hands on your hips and say, what are you trying to communicate with me? And our body often will communicate. So for example, hip pain is like family issues. So if you're experiencing like right hip pain, it could be something with like a male in your family. So like you can constantly be actually asking your body, like, what are you trying to say? And it does usually talk to us. So I'll usually do like some sound healing and like move the energy, like open up the chakras. And then once the clients like experience the sound healing, they're often quite relaxed. They go into the deeper brainwave states. They can experience like techne, which is where the body is like responding to the energy. With breathwork, you would know as well. So after that, then I'll do like the Reiki and the like pulls the energy blockages out of the body. Sometimes we'll like guide them to do some breathing or some visualization depending on what they want. But usually we try and figure out like where it is. Like you said, it's a huge process, so we just try and look at something. And with this type of work, you don't ever want to dive into it too deep. Like I've had clients that have seen people who you know, hypnotherapy, for example, where they just dive into it too soon, and that can often cause like re-traumatizing. So that's why it is like a very slow process in like you try and ease into it,
feel safe, fully surrender and release a little bit.
And I think that's like the magic with breath work is it's like disconnecting from your conscious mind, and it is retraining the body that it's safe. And we drop into our parasympathetic, where you're like actually physically showing the body that it's okay to allow those feelings to come up and be processed and held.
And even with breath work, I know that you can access like the limbic system where your emotions and memories are stored. So that's why I was randomly getting like memories come up about my dad. Like, this is so weird, the first time I ever did it. And I've even seen clients that have come away like emotional, which happens quite a bit. But even saying like, oh, I felt like I lost my periods, I felt really unworthy, but I am worthy, and like just come to realizations like that, which is just so beautiful to see. And even today, one of my clients was really upset, and she was just saying how she felt like she was broken. She was always telling her body that it's like, my body's broken, but actually it was her mind that was stopping her. So it's crazy, even when you just give yourself that time to go inwards and get your brain out of it, kind of, that things can just
Yeah.
come up for you, that it's so crazy really, and that's really healing.
Yeah, that's so true because I feel like we've been taught that there's like this mind body connection, but now they're bringing awareness that that actually is a body mind connection. So, yeah,
mm,
our mind communicates to our body, but our body almost also communicates to our mind as
mm,
well.
yeah, such powerful work that you're doing. um
Oh, thank you. You too. I love watching all of your stuff. I think it's
oh
amazing.
thank you. So is there anything else you kind of want to end on, or feel like people need to take away, or do you feel like we've discussed everything in regards to somatic kind of healing?
Yeah, I feel like we did such a good job about diving into it. It's like when I was trying to think about the stuff to bring, I was like, this could go on for hours. Like,
Yeah,
I feel like
I
we've
can
done a
imagine.
good job,
Yeah.
yeah, to just like keep it concise. But some things I will kind of leave you guys with is some practices that you can sort of do at home if you are feeling like a disconnect with your
Mm.
yoni space, or if you are, you know, experiencing like traumatic periods or anything
Hmm.
like that. So my favorite things to do is just to put on like a really yummy playlist, and I usually shut the blinds. I put headphones in, like lock the door so I know no one's coming in. Because if you've got this feeling of like, oh, someone's going to come in and judge me, then
Yeah.
that shame and that judgment's coming up anyway. So it's kind of undoing what you're wanting to achieve.
Yeah.
So
First off, what's a yummy playlist?
it depends. I think
Is
it's
it like,
subjective for different people. But for me, it's anything that makes me want to like move my hips
yeah,
and
so
like
it
get
always makes,
into that.
yeah,
Yeah, I kind of
okay,
have like a sexy kind of playlist. Like, you know,
yeah,
when you
love
feel
it.
like, oh yeah, not that I look good dancing, but I'm like, I feel good,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of thing.
So no like
And
sad, really mellow songs that we're talking
yeah,
that, yeah.
yeah, go
Okay.
like, yeah, whatever kind of like I have that like my favorite one is like Icy Red, you know, that real like I don't know if you've heard of
Oh,
that. Like I
I
don't
have to
listen
go.
to it normally, but yeah. Oh, I have a few playlists on my Spotify. Just like look up
Ah,
the Touch
cool.
of Clarity Spotify, and I've got like a
I'll do.
Divine Feminine one or like a pleasure playlist. So like yeah, any kind of one
Okay.
that just makes you feel good.
Yeah, sounds great.
um so yeah, so I just usually put that on, like move my hips. Again, you want to come back to that like circular kind of movement, because not only would that be like familiar for your yoni, because obviously
Hmm.
we're cyclical beings, like it's that cycle, but also that can activate our Kundalini, which is a huge topic on its own. But
Yeah.
basically, the Kundalini energy is like this serpent snake energy, and
Hmm.
everyone has it. It's like a little coiled up snake at the base of the spine, and when that's activated and it goes up the spine, it brings balance between the feminine and the masculine. So
Hmm.
anyone that has any like out of balance areas like that, I'm like, just activate that, like open up those areas. So that's like a one little tip that I would say to do. And then the other ones would be just to sit with your yoni space. Like I feel like as a society, and even just us personally, we just don't really spend much time with it, if you know what I mean. Like even during like intercourse or self-pleasure, it's kind of like this quick thing that we just want to get done, like get to the finale and that's it. But if you can actually sit with it, like put your hands there, close your eyes, even again do the circular movement, like send the breath there, it's actually crazy how much emotions can come up for you. And I even do that with it's called like movement meditation. So you're doing like deep breaths or like some breath work, but then you just start like moving around. Or I often do like yoga, but it's not yoga because I'm like not the best at yoga, but I'll do like some yoga poses, like child pose
Hmm.
or cobra, like anything that kind of opens you up, like butterfly pose,
Yeah,
like just to really like, yeah, get that area like open, send the breath there. And often like I'll just start crying for no reason. I'm
mm,
like, why am I crying? Like this was meant to just be like meditation or, you know, relax me. But obviously there's something that's stored there that I didn't
mm.
even realize.
And you don't
And
know
then,
as well, like I find that with breath work, like if something does come up, you don't need to know the reason, you don't need to try and
mhm.
test it all. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's such a good, no, no, that's a
Mm.
really good point. Yeah, I think even me, like I'm very much so like, oh, why does that come from? Why am I feeling that? And you like, you know, you don't need to know. As long as it's felt and held and kind of let go of, then your work's done.
Mhm.
And then yeah, anger release. If you could do any type of anger release, like something so simple, and like be careful doing this, but often I drive the centers up in the hills. So often there's like areas where there's no houses, and I'll just scream at the top of my lungs. And like sometimes I'm like, did I sound like that? Like I didn't even realize that that's what I sounded like.
Yeah.
But getting like really primal is so uncomfortable for us girls, but it's something that I think we need to do. So whether
Mhm.
you do anger release at home, my favorite way is
Yeah.
just getting, Yeah, pillow,
Yeah.
mattress, like going for it. I will say just cleanse afterwards or open up your windows, like let that like air leave and that energy leave, because you don't want to like scream into your pillow and then go to sleep, because then you're
Yeah,
just like reabsorbing all of it.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, that's definitely one I need to, I feel like I do.
Yes.
Oh,
I
cool.
feel like that would be really good for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Mm.
Great, and I've learned a lot.
Oh,
Where
good.
it's really interesting. Like you said, I could carry on talking about this.
Mm.
I find it really interesting.
Yes.
You could dive into literally every single point, and every single
Mm.
practice much deeper as well. But where can people find you to learn a little bit more about you then? Like your website,
Yeah.
that?
Thank you. Yeah, so my business is called A Touch of Clarity. So anyone tuning in from Adelaide, you can find me in Adelaide Hills. Any of my international friends, you can find me on my website, so www.touchofclarity.com.au. My Instagram is just A Touch of Clarity, and I have just started a podcast. I've been really lazy with it, but I've got like about 5 backed up now, so I'm ready to actually dive really deep into this. So my podcast is just A Touch of Clarity podcast.
Cool, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Yay.
Appreciate your time and having a little chat with me.
No, it's been beautiful. I love being in your energy all the time. So thank you so much for having me.
No worries. I hope you have a really great evening.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like I'm on a high now. I'm not going to be able to sleep.
I'm sure you'll find ways to ground yourself and wind back down.
Yeah, well,
Right.
thank you. Have a
No
good
worries.
Sunday.
You too. See you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.